Right. Well, good evening, everyone. I would like to formally open this evening's meeting. As you know, this is the Engage Estero Community Membership Meeting on December the 7th. And what we're going to address this evening is the future of our schools in the area. I'll explain a little bit more about that in just a moment. First of all, though, I would like to thank Mike Amabile, the headmaster here at Estero High School, for allowing us to use this very lovely auditorium this evening, and for the staff, obviously, who are available to help us arrange everything here this evening. I'd also like to thank Terry Flanagan, my colleague here, who's been working very hard with the sound team to make sure that we have a good recording for everyone who might like to listen to this meeting afterwards. You may be aware that at the end of October, Engage Estero set up a public forum meeting where we had a panel of experts, including Steve Sarkozy, the manager of the village of Estero. And at that meeting, we were discussing the future of Estero and what, if you like, various issues had in store for us as we go forward. So it seemed very fitting and appropriate that in conjunction with that, we also, of course, look at what infrastructure issues are going to be in place in the future. Nothing more important than schools, of course. And so it really was with that in mind that we thought it would be very appropriate to have this meeting this evening. Obviously, it's disappointing that not that many people could make it here this evening, but rest assured, I know that many who will be interested in this will follow it up and look at the meeting online, or perhaps look at the summary report that we'll provide after the meeting. It was interesting that after the public forum meeting was held, 825 people have actually viewed the recording of that meeting, on top of course, those who were there at the meeting at FGCU in the first place. So it's very important that obviously people will have access to the information that's covered tonight. So I'd like to just mention Dr. Adam Molloy, who will be our first speaker. Adam, in fact, is the Lee County School District Director and involved in planning, growth, and capacity. And what Adam will do in addressing these issues is how the increasing population, especially younger residents in the area, will impact where and how schools are located. I'd also like to mention Chris Patricca, who will be our second speaker this evening. Chris is the Lee County School Board member for District 3. Chris has a considerable passion for improving educational standards, and of course she will be speaking very much about those issues when she follows Adam. So it's my pleasure to introduce Adam Molloy, who has a number of slides that he'd like to go through and share with you this evening. So thank you, Adam.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I was debating the pullover. This was the family Christmas pullover. I thought it brought a lot of happiness when we took it as a family. So I was like, I'm gonna go for it with the Engage Estero event. So thank you for bearing with me. I'm Adam Molloy, Director of Planning, Growth, and Capacity for the school district. It really is an honor to be able to engage with our communities. Be it Estero, be it out in the Cape or Lehigh, as we grow. Right. That is one constant in our district's history is growth, be it linear or exponential. Terry mentioned, he's like, well, where are you guys at? Like, 2 to 3%. And, thinking about 2 to 3% growth seems small, right? Your money markets are probably getting 5.6. But when you're dealing with 90,000 students, it's exceptionally large. And especially these past 5 years, we have really grown a significant amount. I'm going to put actual numbers as we move through. I'll give you guys regions. I'll give you kind of how we set up not just our current state, but where we're going, kind of our future state for growth in our area. This work we would not be able to have this work without our team. Some of those members are here today, and I really appreciate Ms. Patricca kind of putting this together to say, hey, the Estero community needs to be engaged. They need to be heard, and we need to get that information out there. So I think that that's really important. One thing that you might hear a lot is concurrency, right? Concurrency is key when dealing with growth, right? But concurrency is not just about schools, right? It's also about critical infrastructure such as roads and utilities. Concurrency is something that is really fascinating for us, a growing county, in that we are asked if there are available seats, right? Can we build in this zone? Are there available elementary, middle, high school seats? Okay, and we respond, yes. Now, we don't operate in a typical one-to-one system. So you know that in most school districts, you live at a home, you're assigned an elementary, middle, and high, all the way up, a feeder pattern, right? You're assigned 5 choices in elementary school, 4 to 5 choices on average, right? 5 choices in the current plan at middle, but now we're reducing it down to in between 2 or 3. So that's something that we have to consider when we're talking about concurrency, because a developer out on East Corkscrew is going to ask, are there seats in elementary zone Q? Yes, there's over 240 seats, but are they at the closest school, right? That's a different question. So that's some of the things that we're going to walk through today. I think that that's really important, is understanding what our capacity status is now. And I did see Alan had sent me some questions that were very, I think, in depth when it came to how we hit that tipping point for a school. We also presented our 10-year capital plan, kind of a draft. The final is on January 9th, which included new schools and expansion for the next 10 years. A little bit short of our projected growth, but within the financial constraints that we had to work with. In terms of the agenda for tonight's meeting, and I know it's kind of podium and it's a small group here, we certainly can venture off of the, I did want to get through some of the numbers, but this can become a lot more intimate, and face-to-face questions, feedback, and I do enjoy that as well. But I did want to get through some of the numbers for you guys. I wanted to take a look at the schools and the zones, their respective enrollment and capacity at each. Please know that we do have choice zones for elementary, middle, and high. Now, proximity went into effect for elementary this year. We are proposed for middle school next year. High school, we have not planned to implement or do work on, but you can see a reduction and really an attempt to get closer to community schools. I also will mention kind of a transition of the P2 preference, which is a closest to home preference, which students will now carry, further incentivizing the selection of your closest school. In terms of Greater Estero, so I really like that term, Greater Estero, the greater number of residents and the growth that they're experiencing there, the number of students, and those updated projections will be released in mid-January. I'm going to go over some of that methodology, why we expect to see an increase in some of these areas. Some of the student yield and student generation in the communities in Greater Estero have been much higher than anticipated. And then we're going to end with not only Board Member Patricca's comments, but also just some feedback from you guys. And if we don't have the answer, certainly we can go back and our team can get those numbers and communicate. One of the things that Dr. Bernier is very key on is response and engagement with the community. If the community has a concern, you must address and you must bust your tail in 24 to 48 hours to get as much information as you can to the community and to the community members, because we can only go so far as the community supports us. I mentioned kind of the focus is on the current and projected enrollment information related to not just the village of Estero, which if you just take village proper, right, you only have 2 schools in village proper. You have the school that we're currently at, Estero High School, and you have Pinewoods Elementary, right? But if we're going to talk about Greater Estero, and I think we have to, we have to talk about Greater Estero. We're also going to expand and talk about what those schools look like in that surrounding area. And I think what we'll see is potentially some areas for adjustment as it relates to capital needs based on student yield data and student generation rates. So slide 4 provides an examination of the district's 10-year projected enrollment. I did want to highlight kind of that red trend line. So I graduated high school from Fort Myers High in 2002, and you can see it kind of right there in 03, that red trend line spanning from 03 to 2033, which underscores the remarkable and anticipated exponential growth within our school district. The chart is one thing. You can say, wow, we're growing. You guys all feel that out there, out on the roads, out in your communities. And if you've ever been to the Colonial 75 intersection, I'm sure you're feeling it there as well. That is a challenge by any stretch as it relates to road infrastructure. Now, these projections exclusively pertain to traditional K-12 schools and students and do not encompass charter schools under the school district umbrella. I think that that's important to note. That is something that we are seeing as an ask. As we see charter schools come on, could we please factor that into our student projections? And that's really hard for us because since 2003, we've seen such a large number of charter schools open and close, and then we've had to take those kids in. So it's something that we have to be very careful of and mindful of is incorporating that charter school data. Now, the big number for 2033 is 114,563 K-12 students. That's the current projected student population. And our current capacity is only 91,773, right? So a fairly significant deficit of seats. And how do you add seats, right? You add new schools, you add temporary sites, you add permanent additions on already existing sites, right, to increase the school's capacity. In terms of methodology, this was something that I thought was important because people are sometimes asking about, well, how did you generate those numbers? Well, we work with demographers, Davis Demographics in particular, and they take a look at assessing historic current student data by study area. Study area are really small little neighborhoods, about 100 to 200 kids, and then they have about 1,000 study areas throughout the county. So they break it down by study area, and they take a look at birth rates and organized by school zone and subzone. They factor in mobility, student generation rates, and Dan Oberski, who's in the audience today, he does a lot of work with us as it relates to land, and some of that student generation is really fascinating. Something that we've seen some interesting trends certainly through COVID is price points that didn't generate any students now are generating a decent number of students. We would have thought a neighborhood where the starting homes were 950,000 wouldn't generate many families, but we were wrong. So we're having to adjust and make those adjustments as we look at that, as we look at that data. I mentioned our current seat capacity at 91,000. I think that that's a crucial benchmark to consider. Remember that any increase in student population beyond that capacity would necessitate the addition of seats. Otherwise, you would have to address it in other ways, be it dual sessions, portables, those types of things. I did want to mention also that our student population has doubled, right, in almost 30 years. Okay. Now that's something that I think for me is really exciting to see. The Lee County School District, I believe we're 32nd in the nation. I believe 8th in the state, right? So one of the larger school districts nationwide. So these next slides really highlight the seats and students in the Greater Estero area by level and zone. You can see that overall we do have seats for students in elementary zone Q, proposed middle school zone GG, and high school subzones 2 and 3. Okay. Now, being a choice district, we have to operate within the confines of the capacity of the specific zones, which is why sometimes we feel overcapacity when certain schools are underselected and certain buildings underutilized. So I think that that's really important to think about. So when you're feeling the pressure at Pinewoods or you're feeling the pressure at Three Oaks, you have to think that how we're looking at it in planning is we're looking at it from that zone. Well, that zone has 245 seats, right? Now, can we adjust and do other things outside of planning? Certainly. Can we talk to academics and can we create more of a pull? That's kind of in their realm. But I just wanted you guys to kind of keep that in mind. That's really important. As we look at this type of data, you can see proximity and P2 coming into play here. And I think that that's something that I kind of touched on in the agenda. But what we've added into the student enrollment plan for this year, which is going to be voted on January 9th, is we've added a closest to home preference for the first time, which is if you rank your closest to home school, you receive a P2 preference if you're outside of the P1 2-mile designation. What I think we will see, and I anticipate and project, is we'll see some of those students that weren't selecting their closest to school home. We'll start to see that change over time, and I think that that's important. Oh, sorry. So now we are in elementary zone Q. You can see the capacity pressure at schools like Bonita, Pinewoods, and Three Oaks, but also the underselection and utilization of schools like San Carlos and Spring Creek. I do imagine, again, that the P2 preference will work to address a level of the student distribution here. We have over 200 empty seats, which means little, right, if you're east of 75 in this scenario, right? Because keep in mind, you'll have to travel very far to get past the school. To go to a school if you're unlucky in the lottery. So this is what we're carefully analyzing, this student generation with new developments on Corkscrew. Now, the Davis demographic projections for Village proper when it comes to elementary school is about 907, and this was cycle 2 data 2022-2023, to 834 in 2027 to 836 in 2032. In our weekly meeting, I did ask Davis to look at the Village proper and say, is that slight decline going to continue? And he said that in their initial runs with the data, that he would imagine that it would be slightly higher than that. So that's just in the Village proper for elementary school. I certainly could see adjusting in the updated January forecast when the rapid student generation in communities like the Place is assessed. Now, in terms of the 10-year projections by elementary proximity zone, zone Q, which we're in, is kind of like the 5th or 6th highest growth. Really, it's out in the Cape and Lehigh where we're seeing the most or the highest 10-year projections in our area. So here is middle school proposed zone GG. You can see again the stress on Three Oaks Middle. Exactly 60 seats are available, and this was from a report that we ran last week compared to our FISH database. Now, the Davis demographic projections for the Village when it comes to middle school is 469 current to 415 to 389. So you see that decline. Now, that was from their that was from last year's projections. In January, I would expect that to rise as well. I did want to just make a note too. When you see that there's more students than seats, that does not mean that they don't have an actual seat or a classroom at the school. It just means that they are over the FISH capacity per what the state has. A lot of that is due to over-selection. A lot of that is due to perhaps a crafty use of their school building to best accommodate. In terms of high school seats and students, Estero High School currently has around 1,500 students with room for about 132 more. Now, that does not mean that they have the staff for that. We're really on kind of like the student projection number side. The staff would actually, if any increase, that would have to be properly budgeted in staff as well. Now, projections for high school follow a similar trend as with elementary and middle school, with slight decreases in both 2027 and 2032. So these heat maps, I think, are interesting. So these heat maps are all elementary school students that are attending San Carlos, Three Oaks, Pine Woods, and Bonita. And those are 4 out of the 5 Zone Q schools. So you can see very heavy down, obviously, in Bonita, the San Carlos, Three Oaks area. And then what you start to see, oh, wow, Alan. Yeah, what you start to see is some pretty large student density areas east of 75. Okay. Keep in mind that their closest elementary school would be Pine Woods, and we already saw that the stress that that's putting on Pine Woods. So it puts us in a position, right, where we potentially have to make some capital adjustments as we move forward. I mentioned those 2 areas in the yellow, east of 75, Stony Brook in the Place. And this really breaks it down. So this initiates, this kind of showcases the breakdown by each school. So this heat map shows the density of all students attending Pine Woods Elementary. You can see stretching pretty far west and north into the San Carlos area. And I think that that's, these heat maps kind of, making us more familiar with where our students are coming from. One of the things that I did want to just keep in your guys' mind as we implement proximity and as we implement that P2 preference, what I think you'll start to see is some of those densely populated areas being more closer and connected to those schools that are surrounding them. San Carlos, you can see some outside of that San Carlos area, and then Three Oaks. Three Oaks, one of those schools, where we are seeing some capacity pressure. I worked with a lot of families in the Estero area, in the greater Estero area, as it relates to access to Pine Woods and Three Oaks, right? So that's been top of mind for our planning department and for our teams down at the district is how can we best accommodate? Is it an addition? Is it, maybe working with some of our new developments as we move throughout the next 10 years. I did mention that we were going to go over kind of the capital plan, which we presented on December 5th. This was kind of our presentation of our new construction and expansion projects. The comprehensive list included a total of 12 projects, and the breakdown commenced with the renovation of Bonita Springs and progressed systematically through all the zones, indicating the estimated year of completion for each project. There were some questions as to what certain schools cost, and you guys can see the estimated cost there, but you can also see that the costs fluctuate, either project dependent or level dependent. They do use compounded inflation rates as it relates to the estimated cost for each of the levels. So we anticipate and hope that not only are they close to the mark when we're going through each of the phases for payment and building. The proposed list did encompass 2 projects in the South Zone, a remodel at Bonita and a remodel rebuild at Cypress Lake Middle, 4 new school projects in the West Zone, and 8 schools in the East Zone. This was kind of a strategic distribution. I did want to kind of end on the capital plan that while it is a living document and board approved, we do have to make yearly adjustments, and we're trying to develop a consistent cadence of when those new projections come in. So if we get those new projections on January, we assess, we analyze, we have to make changes, then that will become a regular adjustment to the capital plan. Ideally, there are guardrails to prevent, a large-scale movement of projects from year to year. We would like to put in place something that is consistent and that the public knows is coming by year and by cost. So this is really the heart of why we're here, right? Is to talk about current and future development. So what you have here on the map is you have some very large-scale developments that are on tap for the greater Estero area. Okay, you can see the new developments shown on the map. We went out, I think, with our demographer maybe about a month or two ago, and we toured each of the new developments and we made updates to the phased plan for completion. Okay, they're also taking a look at updating their student yields and their student generation rate based on their years of predicted completion. Right, I mentioned that those new student projections were coming in January, and that capital adjustments will be made following the updated projections. There are opportunities to work with these new communities, whether it be working with them to set aside and purchase land, develop a school in conjunction with them. But currently, there are none of those projects, none of those deals, currently in the 10-year capital plan. As we assess and we take a look at the 10-year capital plan with updated projections, and as these communities come online and we're able to really assess the generation, I think you'll see some movement and some work. And it certainly is not going to stop the work that we do in making sure that we're providing a strong educational environment for all of our students. So I say all of those things to really provide some, I think, just some strong bullets as it relates to considerations for planning. We know that we're growing as a district. I mentioned, kind of our exponential growth. Even looking at our past 20 years, if you look at the linear model, we're growing at about 900 students. So a linear growth model, is a formula. We calculated that for 20 years. That's really at 900 students per year. You look at exponential for 20 years, you're about at 0.54%, right? But if you look at the past 5 years, you're looking at closer to 2.53%, right? And if that stabilizes, okay, we'll make the adjustments. If that continues, we will have to make the adjustments, and we'll have to make the adjustments in a fairly quick pace. We do have some considerations: expansion on current property, both temporary and permanent additions. For those of you that are familiar with the school district's history, around 2003, 2004, they added additional buildings at almost every elementary school to add capacity. They had kind of like a nickname based on the superintendent at the time, but they added a decent amount of capacity at all of our existing sites. And that's certainly something that we could look into. Updating the new enrollment projections and then updating the capital needs and then providing that to the board for a vote is something that we're looking to do yearly. I mentioned the reevaluation of the capital needs and the updates to the capital plan. And then that last one is a big question: concurrency and working with new developments. Our team has been told to tell developers that we need to have a more in-depth discussion about what concurrency means. We can no longer just hand them a letter that says, yes, there are seats in the zone. They need to know specifically where those seats are and what that means for those living in their communities. And that has not been properly communicated over the past 15 years that we've had this wide open choice. Because you could technically have someone living in Estero going to school close to Central Fort Myers, right, and be provided transportation. And I think that that's something that's been key for our department, is now saying, well, we need to work with you a little bit more on what that concurrency means. And I think that that's extremely important for us as a school district, as we move forward. I knew that this conversation with Estero was key, right, to establishing that relationship. I remember I met with Mark a while back, and he was providing me all this data on residential development and students that were being generated within those. And it is here, and we are feeling it. I gave you guys kind of a macro, overview of where we are, but please know that it is on the radar, and it is something that we're looking to address year by year and make necessary adjustments to the capital plan, as we move forward. At this time, I did want to call Ms. Patricca if you had any comments, or if we just wanted to open it up for feedback and questions, and we could look to address that. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Just before you go, does anyone have a particular question for Adam while he's on the podium here? Mark.
So, Adam, one of the things that I was kind of wondering, school districts got various properties out there. there a kind of an average for each type of school? The elementary needs 60 acres, and K-8 needs 5, high school needs. And if you could give us that feedback. I've seen some numbers about.
Yeah, so we do have an inventory of property, about 32 vacant properties, varying in size and acreage. Some donated very small, some purchased very large for multiple school sites. Dan can correct me if I'm wrong, because I know he's pretty good on these marks. But I believe for an elementary school, we're looking at that kind of 35 to 45 range, 45 to 50. Okay. And then much higher for middle and high school as it relates to the athletic fields and extra buildings that accompany our prototypes. Yeah, and I believe he said the 25 to 35 range for elementary, the 40 to 50 range for middle, and then the next group up, 50 to 60 for high school. 40 to 60. Now it really depends on the size. Well, the shape, of the land as well. So we do have some land that is like a perfect rectangle or square, much smaller in acreage, where we can build a high school. But we also have some land that it requires us to be a little bit more creative as it relates to the wetlands and the environmental mitigation and how we set that up.
It appears that the school district is also looking at
Yeah, Mark, I think for the K-8 approach, I do think that is a very desirable kind of educational approach. Certainly, the Capital Committee has 2 K-8s in the current 10-year capital plan. They have the rebuild of Hector Caparata, which was destroyed by the hurricane, not just as an elementary, but also as adding the additional middle school seats. And they have the innovation school in there at 2027. And that was a K-8 as well. We do have 4 other K-8s, so Sanibel, Alva, North Myers Academy, and Veterans Park. It is a seamless kind of continuation educational experience. I bet it has a lot of pluses. As a former teacher, I think it would be amazing to work in a K-8, really family, really community from K to 8. From a capacity standpoint, it poses a significant problem for us mathematically. So our K-8 prototype is about 1620 or 1600, right? And our prototype for elementary is 1000. And our prototype for middle school, we're proposing to raise from 1200 to 1800. Now, whether that gets to 1800 or 1500, it gives us a lot more seats at each level than the K-8 does. So we would have to carefully balance with our capital committee, that educational approach versus the seat need, right? If it's just strictly seat need on my end, I'm going to propose the traditional larger prototypes, right? But we have to balance that out with the educational experience and environment, with our other teammates.
You referenced earlier growth and development on the east part of East Corpus Group. How much do you do in terms of coordinating with those developers and understanding the type of people that come into those communities, prospects of children? Estero is basically a retirement community. They, essentially 60%, 60 plus. So the different demographic here than it is that's coming in on folks with these folks who are areas. How do you kind of look at that and ensure that you're ready to deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really, it's about making contact, and I want to say our demographers each year they're updating that database and making sure that those phase completions they meet with each one of the developers. They see what their price points are. They're able to adjust their price points by study area and what that typically produces on average as it relates to families. Like I mentioned, we were anticipating lower student yields with some of those price points out on Corkscrew, and we'll have to make those adjustments. But once we make those adjustments, that sets a formulaic precedent, which we then will use and hold. But it's really working with those developers, meeting with those developers, and seeing, kind of what they're, what they expect and what they're building. Some developers aren't really building for families, right? As you mentioned, some developers are, and they're marketing as such. And we've been in contact with developers that want to really advertise that they have a school within their community, right? And that's certainly an option that we can pursue. It's not, I think in theme, we haven't really gone after it. We haven't really built like in communities, I think in large part, just because of the choice system, because it was going to be available all over. Now, as we're getting a little bit tighter, perhaps we're going to have to work with developers and communities as we move forward. It's not really an if, right? I mean, we are doing it, and I think that I do think it's really important. One thing that we have to be kind of patient on, and they have to be patient with us, is that they have to get to a certain point, right? Some are just in different phases of where they're looking to be before we can make a potential commitment. We're playing catch up in a lot of areas as it relates to the East and Lehigh, the 82, I guess what they're calling the 82 growth corridor, the Burnt Store corridor, the 31 growth area, the Burnt Store Marina, corridor, like all of these different growth pockets, we are playing catch up. And we've got to be very careful, I think, about how proactive we can be without having a full understanding of what the students and how many students are going to be generated in those areas.
Mark, may I suggest that we move forward just for a moment with Chris's talk, and then if we have a little bit of time at the end, then perhaps we can ask Adam to come back. But I would like to introduce Chris Patricca now. As I mentioned, Chris is a very passionate person about education. She has children of her own, which she obviously wants to do the best for. And in fact, if you'd like to pick up the leaflet either on the way out, if you haven't done, it will provide more details, both about Adam and about Chris Patricca, so that you can gain a little bit more insight. Because in the interest of time, I'd like to ask Chris to take the stage. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. So let's give it up again for Dr. Molloy. He's amazing. He's amazing. He is an example of what makes my job so easy. When you have staff that shows up to give presentations and give data and give information to the school board like that, it's awfully easy to make decisions. And I think that Dr. Molloy, his true strength was in answering those questions, right? He came up, he gave a presentation. It was very detailed. It was very comprehensive. He didn't know what questions were going to be asked, but he had the answers. And we do the same thing to him as a board. And he's phenomenal, as are many members of our staff. The only thing I wanted to say about your presentation is it always blows my mind that Bonita Middle doesn't have more kids in it. 2 of my 4 children attended Bonita Middle, and 2 of my 4 attended Three Oaks Middle. And Bonita Middle is an amazing school. I cannot fathom being assigned to that school and not being super excited to go there. I mean, Three Oaks Middle is a great school too, don't get me wrong. But Bonita Middle is a little bit more of a drive, but it was so worth it for my 2 kids. So if you take anything out of this, if you get the Bonita Middle assignment, jump up and down with joy because it's a great school. So that's not my focus tonight. I have to start my talk tonight by saying that I am one of 7 board members. I am here tonight to speak about my own views. My views do not represent the views of the entire school board of the School District of Lee County. And I am going to cover 4 topics tonight. My first topic is going to be the need to attract more teachers and potential workforce or teacher housing. The second is volunteerism in our schools. The third is the biggest thorn in my side for the past 7 years, which is greater parental involvement in education. And the final is new initiatives that are on the horizon, and that one's really exciting to me, at least. So we talk about the need to attract more teachers. Dr. Molloy is an example of why we have difficulty retaining teachers. You don't know that Dr. Molloy was a Golden Apple history teacher at North Fort Myers High School. Imagine that guy rapping and doing interpretive dances in front of a high school class. He was an outstanding teacher, but you can also tell by his presentation that the constraints of the classroom were too limiting for him. So we couldn't keep this amazing teacher in front of our students because his talents were needed at the district. That's one of the issues that we have with retention. We have such amazing teachers in our classrooms. They move up. The only way for them to move up is to move into administration or into planning and development and no longer be in front of our students. What we have done in terms of trying to attract more teachers, what we have done as a district, as a school board, we have recently, I want to say it was last year, expanded our healthcare coverage to include families. So now all of our employees, to include teachers, can put their families on their healthcare and their health insurance at a lower cost. This year, we gave 8% raises to all staff, and the Teachers Association of Lee County, which is the union, sort of split those raises up to different levels of teachers based on how long they have worked for the district. We've engaged, since Dr. Bernier took over as the superintendent, we have engaged in a shift in culture. And any shift in culture in an organization as large as ours is going to take time, but we are trying to shift to a far more positive culture so that our employees have more say and more feedback in the decision-making that goes on in each of their buildings. That's a fulfilling place to be, right? If you're an employee and you bring an idea to your boss and that idea is heard and it's discussed and it's either implemented or not with an explanation, you're a much happier employee in that building, and it makes it a place where more teachers would want to work in Lee County. My favorite thing about Lee County is you got to come here to teach at the beach, right? I mean, we live in paradise. Why wouldn't you want to be in a classroom teaching at the beach? The only bad thing about our classrooms is the air conditioning. It makes them too cold, right? But outside of our buildings, this is an amazing place to live. So teaching at the beach, I think, is a wonderful concept and something we need to push a little bit more. Now, moving on to housing. Housing is absolutely, no doubt, a huge problem. And it's not just a problem for teachers and paraprofessionals and bus drivers. It's a problem for servers and bartenders and EMTs and nurses, everybody that provides the services in our community that makes this a wonderful place to live. Housing has become exorbitantly expensive and cost prohibitive, frankly. The problem for me as a school board member is I'm not in the business of housing. I'm in the business of education. I'm not in the business of building facilities where people can live. I'm in the business of building schools where we can educate our children. So the solution, I believe, to the housing problem that we have here in Lee County doesn't lie with the school district, but the school district will be a partner with the agencies where this problem lies and where the solutions lie. We want to find the solutions for our employees because we need teachers in all of those buildings that Dr. Molloy showed you that we have to build. We need teachers in front of our kids, and we can't get that if we don't have affordable housing. So moving on to volunteers. Oh my gosh, volunteers are the best thing ever. That's how I started. I started as a volunteer in my children's elementary school, Pinewoods Elementary. I walked on campus the very first day we moved here, and somebody from PTO said, "You're new. You're the new secretary of PTO." And I went on to spend just about full time. It was like a full-time job being out on that campus. I was in classrooms. I was running events. I was doing a lot of things. And by being in that school, I didn't just have access to my children's teachers. I had access to all of the teachers in the school. I had access to the administration. I had access to the paras. I had access to the people who work in the lunchroom. And what I learned was that our school was absolutely amazing. Top to bottom, our school was absolutely amazing. So when we talk about volunteerism, especially in Estero, somebody said we have 60% of the people who live here are age 60 or over. What that means is that a lot of the people who live in Estero used to live someplace else, and they were wildly successful in their professional lives. And they have the resources as a result of that success to retire to Paradise, which is where we live. We live in Paradise. So we have a whole bunch of people that live right here in Estero with tremendous expertise and tremendous experience. And if they were to bring that experience into the classroom, imagine the impact that they could have on the lives of children. If you were a financial planner in your prior life, or somehow involved in the financial industry, junior achievement is a wonderful opportunity to volunteer in our schools. My husband and I work together out in my other life. I do some financial planning. And we often lament about the fact that financial literacy in this nation is lacking significantly. And it's not just our kids. Many of our clients, I just did the report on our clients. Many of our clients are over the age of 60. And they struggle with cash flow planning. They don't have enough money to save for retirement. They struggle with the basic concepts of income taxation. Why? Because maybe they didn't learn it in school. Maybe their parents didn't teach them. I don't know why. They don't know, but it's a problem from our young to our old, and it needs to be addressed. Florida now requires the teaching of what we're calling economics in our schools. Do I have one or two children taking that class right now? I'm looking at my husband. I have two children taking that class right now, and it really is basic financial concepts like checking accounts and what is a stock and what is a bond and what does it mean to invest, and they have some investment games and they can play around with it, and they do come home and they do talk about it. But junior achievement it takes a much deeper dive. Mark Cuban actually credits junior achievement for his success because he was exposed to junior achievement early on. So junior achievement is a wonderful opportunity for you to volunteer in our schools, but it is not the only opportunity. You don't have to commit to junior achievement in order to get into our schools. You can go into the libraries and you can shelve books, or you can read to a child. I was talking to somebody earlier about that. You can mentor a child. So many of our kids don't have regular adult figures in their lives on a regular basis. And if you could go into a school and establish a relationship with a child, you could literally change their lives. So I don't want to beg, but I'm kind of begging a little bit for you all to please pick a school. Whatever time you have, go in, establish a relationship with a kid, and make a difference. And selfishly, it will help me. Because once you get into our schools, you will realize that what you're seeing on social media and what you see in the news and what you're hearing out there about this generation of kids simply is not true. You can't walk into our schools and not realize how wonderful our kids are. You're also going to realize how hard our teachers work and how much they love their students and how dedicated they are to their students. You're going to realize how wonderful our administrators are. If you're outside the schools and you're reading social media and you're reading the news, that's not the impression that you get. But I promise you, boots on the ground in our schools, amazing things are happening every day. And if you come in and you volunteer, then you become part of my army that goes out and corrects people. When they say something is wrong with a school or something is wrong with this generation or whatever you're hearing, you can help to correct them because you're in the schools and you know the truth. I will say 4 kids. My youngest is 16. He's a junior. I am incredibly proud of the education that my children have received in our schools. Incredibly proud. So moving on to my next subject, which is greater parental involvement. This is a problem I had hoped to solve in my 2 terms on the school board, but unfortunately I'm an epic failure. Raise your hand if you're a parent of children in our schools. Okay, half of those people are staff, so you don't count. Not a lot. There's not a lot of parents in the audience tonight. And I'm not knocking the parents. Those parents are home helping their kids with homework, or they're driving them to and from, what season is it, basketball practice, or they're working a second or a third job, or they're sleeping because they have to work the overnight shift. It's not that parents don't want to be involved. It's that so much in life is taking up their time, making it difficult to be involved. However, it's a really important factor in terms of educational outcomes for kids. Parental involvement is directly tied to positive education outcomes for kids. So how can we get our parents to get more involved? How can we get more parents to show up on a night like tonight to learn more about what's happening in our schools? What have we done? As a district, what have we done? We have a social media presence. We send text messages to parents. We send emails to parents. Teachers and administrators often call home. And it's not just for bad stuff. Every once in a while, I'll get a call from a teacher, and they'll tell me that my child did something good in class that day. And I'm always surprised by that, because whenever you get a call from the school, you always expect it to be bad, right? But when they call with that something positive, it's really a wonderful thing. We do town halls. We also do events like we're doing tonight. We have school board meetings, a lot of them. And we also have this thing called Parent University, where you can go in and take a series of classes and take little quizzes and graduate from Parent University, where you'll learn a lot more about our school district. And there's some nutritional advice in there. There's some advice or teaching on how to support your children in education. It's wonderful. But when we celebrate Parent University graduation at the school district, at a school board meeting, we maybe have 3 graduates. I think maybe we have 8 graduates. And you saw the numbers of students we have. We have tens of thousands of parents in the district who are not engaging in these kinds of activities. And like I said, I don't blame them. I'm a parent, and if you looked at my personal email inbox, it's probably over 10,000, and a lot of them are from the school district. And I don't always necessarily know what's going on. I sit on the school board, so that's not a good thing to admit. My final subject is other education initiatives, and this is what I'm really excited about. It's AI, artificial intelligence. Are we all familiar with it at this point? We were in Tampa last week, the week before, I can't remember which. On the final day, our final presenter talked about artificial intelligence, and I've not been more excited about a subject since I first got on the school board. The potential, if we use artificial intelligence correctly in this school district, the potential for teachers and students is literally unlimited. It is really amazing. When I first heard about artificial intelligence, my primary concern was academic integrity and cheating. So let's go back to before the internet was created. Anyone have a guess of how many students in a nationwide study, anybody have a guess on how many students cheated before the internet? Nobody's going to guess? 10%. Any other guesses? 60%. It was 80%. 80% of students, this is in a national study, students in Lee County would never do that, but in a national study, 80% of students, it was estimated 80% of students cheated before the internet. Anyone have a guess of how many students cheated after the internet? 10%? How much? 90%. The answer is 80%. If you're going to cheat, you're going to cheat. Whether the tool makes it easier or not, you're going to cheat, you're going to cheat. So the potential for a violation of academic integrity is not a reason to be afraid. It is not a reason to shy away from this. Artificial intelligence is not just ChatGPT. There's a lot more to it. I'm very familiar with ChatGPT. I'm not very familiar with the other artificial intelligence tools that can be used in an education setting, but we got a little sprinkle of the various capabilities of artificial intelligence in education. It was very exciting. We do need to teach students for sure how to use it correctly and to make sure that academic integrity stays in place. And we also need to train our teachers on how to use it. And when I say something like that, teachers go, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's gonna put another thing on my plate. The purpose of AI is to take things off of a teacher's plate. So the presenter was a teacher, and she explained to us that she was teaching an intensive reading class, and she had to write 2 essays, one that was like a very well-written essay and one that was a poorly written essay, so the students could see the difference between the two. And it took her hours of her time outside the classroom when she's not in front of her kids. This is hours of preparation just for 2 essays. Today, she could go into ChatGPT, put the parameters in, and within seconds, those essays would pop up for her. And that's saving her hours of time. That's one instance where hours of time could be saved for teachers if we can properly train them on how to use it. And it's a little scary to me as I get older. The technology is getting so far beyond me. So it might, some of our teachers might be a little bit resistant to it. But once they see how amazing it can be, I believe that we'll get there. So those are the main topics that I was asked to cover tonight. Does anybody have any questions for me or for Dr. Molloy at this point? Mark, I thought you were going to let me off the hook.
Can you hold the mic a bit closer?
Yeah, you're still young. I understand the Florida legislature passed a law that was trying to build that start times for the high school. So one day they'll get proximity also for the high school, and then we're going to change the time. So that's going to be one.
Yeah, so the question, I don't know if people online can hear, the question was about the state mandated changes to start times. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I think middle needs to start no later than 8 and high no later than 8:30. Am I correct on that? Thank you. Right now, our high schools start at 7:05 and our middles start at 9:45. And there may be some changes in there, but for the most part, that's when our schools start. Study after study after study shows that kids need more sleep, especially the older teenagers need more sleep. So you would think that pushing off start times would lead to better academic outcomes, right? I told you I was at a training last week in Tampa, and one of the breakout sessions was very topical. I attended the breakout session, and we had some districts there who have already moved their start times for various reasons, and the difference in educational outcomes was 0. There was no change in educational outcomes. So it is going to be a tremendous challenge for us. It's going to be a tremendous challenge for our families. It's going to be a tremendous challenge for the businesses around our schools, the after-school care, and our kids who work after school. I mean, we have a lot of kids who work after school to support their families, to pay the rent and to put food on the table. And it cuts down on the number of hours that they have to put in after school for that purpose. So it's going to be a challenge, but it's one of those challenges where we can say we didn't create the problem, but we do have to find a solution that works for our kids and our families. Thank you guys for your time. And question.
One more question.
Somebody wanted to take advantage of your hearing offer.
I would contact any one of the principals at any one of our schools. I consider the greater Estero area, the schools were up there on the board earlier, and get with me before I leave, and I'll give you my email address and my telephone number, and you can call me and I'll let you know for sure.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Have a happy holiday season.
Just before we do finish, I'd actually like to add my own personal thanks to Chris for actually what I thought was both a very passionate and emotional set of facts and figures that she provided. It certainly brought a tear to my eye listening to what she said, and I think that those people who listened to the words that she mentioned will probably have a similar reaction. I think it was very important what you said, and really appreciate that. Thank you. But in formally closing today's and this evening's meeting, I did fail to mention who I was. So I know most of you here know who I am, but those who are listening may not. My name is Alan Bowditch. I'm the Chief Communications Officer of Engage Estero. And in addition to what was just mentioned, if indeed anyone is interested in providing services for the schools, similar to what was just mentioned, Engage Estero does have an active involvement in providing volunteers to help with AI within the schools, and we'd be very happy to do that. So you can contact us by signing on to the website and getting in touch with us that way, should you wish to, just as an additional contact idea. But anyway, thank you very, very much for coming this evening. Thank you to Dr. Adam Molloy and Chris Patricca for sparing their time. They have volunteered to come out tonight to address everyone who is here and all those who are listening. We really very much appreciate your time and your effort. And on behalf of everyone tonight, I would again like to thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.